Let's start with a simple question most people don't bother asking. Where did religion actually come from? Not this or that particular religion, but the entire idea of religion itself. Why did human beings begin to believe in invisible forces, sacred rituals, and supernatural beings that ruled over life and death? It didn't begin with some divine spark or heavenly revelation. It began with fear, confusion, and the desperate human need to make sense of a world that often felt random, dangerous, and cruel. Before we had science, we had stories. Before we had weather forecasts, we had gods throwing lightning bolts. And before we had medicine, we had spirits and curses to explain why someone suddenly got sick or died. Religion started not because people were foolish, but because they were trying to survive in a world they didn't understand. When early humans looked up at the sky, they didn't see atmospheres and planetary rotations. They saw power. When the rain stopped coming and crops failed, they didn't think about climate cycles. They wondered what they had done to offend the sky. Everything was personal, because they had no concept of impersonal forces. They saw intention behind every shadow. That's called agent detection, and it's built into our psychology. We evolved to assume that rustling in the bushes meant a predator. Better to mistake the wind for a wolf than the other way around. And that instinct, to detect a mind behind every event, slowly grew into gods, spirits, and unseen powers. Over time, those instincts turned into rituals. People danced, sacrificed, chanted, prayed. They hoped their actions would control the uncontrollable. When crops grew after a rain dance, they thought the dance had worked. And when the rain didn't come, they blamed themselves for not doing it right. That's called pattern seeking. We're hardwired to look for cause and effect, even when there isn't one. Now multiply that across generations. As tribes grew, so did the stories. Oral traditions evolved. Gods became more specific, more powerful, more demanding. They stopped being simple explanations and started becoming laws, punishments, rewards. People weren't just afraid of drought anymore. They were afraid of sin, guilt, and eternal consequences. Religion moved from being a guess about the world to a system of social control. And it worked. It gave people structure, identity, purpose. It united tribes under common beliefs. It told them who they were, where they came from, and how they should live. It bonded communities together with sacred rules and shared myths. These weren't just stories anymore. They became the foundations of culture, morality, and power. But they weren't based on truth. They were based on usefulness. That's a key distinction. Religion didn't survive because it was right. It survived because it was effective. It helped manage large groups of people before there were laws and police. It gave kings divine authority. It made people obey, not because they feared rulers, but because they feared invisible punishment. That's not an accident. That's design. Anthropologists have traced this pattern across civilizations. The more complex the society, the more structured and hierarchical the religion became. In small bands of hunter-gatherers, gods were like spirits of nature. But in empires, gods became bureaucrats. There were high gods, low gods, priesthoods, rituals, temples, taxes disguised as offerings. Religion became institutionalized. And once that happened, questioning it wasn't just heresy, it was treason. That's when religion stopped being just a belief system and became an engine of power. Those who controlled the narrative, the myths, the scriptures, the sacred roles, controlled the people. And that's when things turned dark. You see, if your tribe worships one god and mine worships another, and we both think ours is the only true one, then we're not just different. We're enemies. Religious wars weren't accidents. They were baked into the design. Belief became tribal. My God isn't just better than yours. Your God is false. And if your God is false, you're a threat to truth itself. This tribal thinking led to centuries of bloodshed. The Crusades, the Inquisitions, witch hunts, forced conversions. None of this was an accident. It was the logical result of a system that claims exclusive truth without evidence and demands obedience without question. Now you might wonder, if religion started from fear and ignorance, why is it still around? Part of the answer lies in psychology. Religion doesn't just explain the world. It also gives people comfort. The idea that someone is watching over you, that death isn't the end, that suffering has a purpose. These are incredibly powerful emotional hooks, and once you're taught them from childhood, they're hard to question. They feel true, even when they're not. This is what sociologists call cultural inertia. Beliefs persist not because they're logical, but because they're passed down, reinforced, and emotionally satisfying. You inherit your religion long before you understand it. You sing the songs, follow the rituals, absorb the stories, and by the time you're old enough to ask questions, the answers have already been drilled in. But not everyone buys in. Throughout history, there have always been skeptics, critics, doubters. Ancient philosophers like Democritus and Epicurus openly questioned the gods. Lucretius wrote about a universe governed by natural laws, not divine will. In some eras, questioning religion could get you killed. In others, it sparked revolutions. The Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, the rise of secular democracies, all of them chipped away at the religious monopoly on truth. Still, religion adapted. It rebranded. It softened some of its claims, became more symbolic, more metaphorical. But the core dynamic remained. Belief without evidence, obedience without question, hope without grounding. And that raises the real question: do we still need it? Today, we have tools our ancestors couldn't dream of. We have microscopes, satellites, medicine, psychology, philosophy. We understand the causes of disease, the structure of the universe, the workings of the brain. We can model weather patterns, treat mental illness, and study human behavior with scientific rigor. We no longer need to invent invisible agents to explain thunder or disease or death. But the emotional needs that gave rise to religion, those haven't gone away. We still fear death. We still crave meaning. We still want to believe that life is more than just atoms and accidents. And religion offers a simple, comforting answer. There is a plan. There is a watcher. There is more after this. But simplicity doesn't make something true. In fact, often the truth is harder, messier, less comforting, but it's also more honest. The story of how religions started isn't a story of divine revelation. It's the story of a species trying to cope with its own fears, its ignorance, its mortality. It's the story of stories, how they helped us survive, organize, and build civilizations, but also how they blinded us, divided us, and held us back. An understanding that history isn't about disrespect, it's about clarity. If we can see religion for what it is, a human creation, born of human needs, we can start to ask better questions. What do we believe now? Why? What evidence do we have? What kind of world are we building? And can we build it not on fear, but on understanding? Not on obedience, but on inquiry? Not on stories, but on truth? That's not just a philosophical question. It's a practical one. Because the world we're living in, the one shaped by ancient beliefs, still carries the weight of those origins. And if we want to move forward, we have to understand where we came from. And sometimes that means letting go, even of the most sacred stories.